Enter if you dare this ghastly conversation of teens fraught with despair and recent lacerations. Final girl, chase after her, don't let her get away. But first, the Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA.
Welcome to Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA. That's Tim.
That's Andy.
And this is a podcast about horror. Every week, Tim and I are going to get together and we're going to talk about a different movie from the horror genre, from the well-revered classic down to that pin-headed gem in the back of your video store shelf. Today, Tim and I are going to be talking about the 1987 British thriller Hellraiser. Tim, let me ask you something. You got anything you consider pleasure that some consider pain?
That is a great question.
You can be as personal as you like, or you can pass.
Sure. I'm not one to turn away from an interesting question. I fight, as you know. I mean, I try not to overly talk about it here because I'll go on forever. But I, as part of my lifestyle and my hobby, I participate in full contact fighting and kickboxing, and getting hit in the face does not. It hurts. Don't get me wrong. I'm getting hit by another human being who's really good at hitting hurts, but it doesn't. I don't think it hurts as bad as most people who haven't been hit in the face would think that it would. Right. And it's just enough to kind of rev you up a little bit. And now if they hit you hard enough and they sort of rattle your brain and you go a little unconscious for a second, that's another interesting feeling, because that's almost a feeling. It's actually elation. Like, you would think that you would feel really nauseous or bad, but It's actually your brain like just starts firing, I don't know, dopamine or serotonin or something, but you feel really elated, or maybe it's just the loss of oxygen. I don't know, but it actually makes you feel really good and calm and happy. And then you hopefully snap back out of that quickly before they hit you again. Right. But no, I enjoy that. Sometimes, that contact, if you're into fighting, lets you know, like, okay, boom, here we go. Let's do this. Let's mix it up a little bit, So I actually enjoy those sensations.
Oh, nice. Interesting. Well, I think you'd have a good time then with our Cenobite friends in this week's movie. It's Hellraiser from the Twisted Mind of Clive Barker. The new
and gravelly voice of Clive. It is painful. I love the man. Don't get me wrong. I love that guy, but I feel like I just want to rub moisturizer on his larynx, like every time he speaks.
I don't know if I've really heard Clive Barker talk. Does he have a voice?
Well, it's like sandpaper. It sounds like it's painful for him to speak.
Oh man.
Yeah. It's intense.
Well, yeah, this is his big breakout, right?
Oh yeah.
Was he writing novels before this? Yeah, of course he was.
Yep, he was.
And and he wanted to direct his own movie. So he said, I've got a great idea. I just watched Little Shop of Horrors, and let me tell you, I was thinking, what if the dentist had the plant?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Or what if the dentists were like these like bringers of pleasure? Right. Which I guess that's in the same movie as well, in Little Shop.
It's more, what if the crazy person had the thing they needed to kill and feed?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. But no, you're right.
But that raises another question about pain and pleasure. We will get to that later. Let's not dwell on that.
Yeah. No, but you're right. He had been dissatisfied with what people had done. Like just smaller British production companies had latched on to some of his short stories and his novels, and he wasn't happy with it, so he set out on his own to do it. But we'll get into more of that. You want to go ahead and fill us in on the story of this tantalizing?
That is what I forgot to write out. So this one I'm just gonna have to do off the top of my head. This one I really did put no effort into. Oh man. All right. I'm just gonna lay it out. All right.
Yeah.
There's a puzzle box. If you open it, it summons pleasure demons. So the film opens with a guy opening the box. He's killed. Now his family is now moving into his house, into the house that he was killed, and just due to an unfortunate accident where some blood was spilled, was enough to resurrect him, and he is now a semi-corporeal form, and he needs human blood in order to fulfill the transformation. Fuck Tim, this is a convoluted movie.
It is, but now that you say it, it
and he does it through the help of his brother's wife, who he once had an affair with. So they have a romantic relationship. It's a lot of layers to this movie. And so he's just trying to be a guy again, you know. But the Cenobites are not going to be happy to find out that he escaped them, whatever that meant. We'll get to all that. All that. Let's just start off by saying this movie, or at least I would say this franchise, is regarded as a top tier franchise, right? Like it's held up there with, I would say, Nightmare, Friday, Halloween. I'd say people would put Hellraiser up there. It might be the one that's teetering off the shelf, but I still feel enough would put it on that top shelf. And Pinhead himself is lumped in, I would say, as a top, you know, like just recognized monster.
Yes, and I tell you what, I don't know how I feel about that. Actually, I do know how I feel about that, but I want to break it in gently because I know
we both feel how we don't know how we feel.
No, there are a lot of people out there that love Hellraiser, and they loved it right from the beginning. I remember people in the late 80s and especially the 90s when the sequels started coming out. I don't have an exact count. I believe it's 10 movies total. That there are 10 Hellraiser movies. And so, and there were people that were super into it back then. And I was not among them because I was really more of a slasher guy. And this is by no means a slasher movie. You're right. It does get lumped in with those other franchises. And it's hard for me to speak on it like an expert because I want to get it right out in the open that I am not a Hellraiser expert, but I do have some very strong opinions, both good and bad, on this movie. So I feel qualified to definitely speak to this film, but I will say that from what I've heard, that the sequels very quickly got worse and worse and worse. And we've seen that happen before.
Oh, I could imagine, because there's not a lot to the background of this. I mean, because that's the thing. My point I was going to make earlier was about how people regard this franchise. I bet there are very few who could probably explain what happens in the first movie. I think a lot of people are just know of Pinhead. They're like, oh yeah, they're like these crazy demon guys and they're like really brutal and it's really gory. But like this movie, they're barely fucking in it at all. This movie is more about this, you know, family and the affair, and, you know, so once that story is over, now you're only continuing it with these Cenobites, and there's not really a lot there. They're just kind of masochistic. So what the fuck can you possibly do with 10 movies like that? Because franchise like I you know, there have been 11 or 12, depending on if you count reboots or not, of like Friday the 13th. Now, I could tell you how each one of those is distinct from the other. I could not tell you how any of the Hellraisers are distinct from each other. I'm aware of like up to 3, and then I didn't even know they made more after that.
Yeah, apparently, like, I don't know if it was the last one or among the last ones where like it ended up just being like filmed straight to video in Romania.
Right.
Like, literally, like,
yeah.
it's just,
how many of those were, they had to be a lot were straight to video.
Right.
After 3, I would imagine.
Yeah. And the thing is, I don't even know how much Clive Barker was involved in, the subsequent sequels. But in contrast to those other films, those other franchises, Wes Craven and Sean Cunningham and the guys involved at the origins of those other major franchises were not necessarily directly involved with every single sequel, but they were always around, and they would always maybe swoop back in to kind of bring things back up to par. But I don't know to what extent Clive Barker was involved, but I will say that I don't believe that this movie probably deserves to be put on that same mantle with those other franchises. I think that there are a lot of really cool things, a lot of really original things, and I like the idea of a movie really directly dealing with sex in horror, because it's always, there's always sex involved and TNA involved in slashers, and just sticky fumblings of hormone-ridden teenagers in the woods. Like, there's always a lot of that. But this movie tried to take things a little bit deeper. I do kind of still take a little issue with that, though, because you can't read one article about this movie without seeing the words pleasure and pain together. Okay. But I don't see a whole lot of pleasure going on.
That's what I was wondering. Where are the demons who are like giving you ice cream and being like, doesn't this suck? Doesn't this awful? Rocky road.
Yeah, rum raisin.
No, it's like because the whole concept behind them is they can't distinguish between pleasure and pain, but all they do is pain.
Right, exactly. And the thing is, and don't get me wrong, I understand that there are people out there that derive physical pleasure from pain, but usually the idea of S&M is that just as a metaphor, it's slap and tickle, right? You get a little,
you have a safe word, it can get out of control.
And it is a mix of things that do feel pleasurable and things that are painful, and then you kind of combine those and swirl them together. So I get that, but you're right; it's nothing but pain on the menu for this day and this movie. And so I think that's a bit of a stretch there when they try to push the pleasure and pain thing.
Cut off your face, and I'm reorganizing it. Do you like that? Do you like
right?
Like I'm smushing your nose together. Ugh.
Yeah, it's more like torture and pain. That would be a better grouping of what's happening here. But that being said, I do like the idea of a sexy like the sort of underside of of sex and culture and S&M clubs and stuff of that. That's interesting stuff. But I feel like they're really headed on a clear path of that in the beginning, and that it even that part of it kind of dissolves pretty quickly. But before.
Well, what do you mean? What do they show?
Well, I guess
in that?
I guess what I'm saying is that in the beginning of the movie, like, we're seeing some of these past memories of, we'll get into the characters in a bit, but we're seeing some sexual scenes intermixed with, we're seeing scenes of pain, but we're also seeing scenes that feel sexual and feel pleasurable or tantalizing. And pretty soon, like, that's the sex angle really is kind of like the sex for sex sake, like intercourse is sort of pretty quickly abandoned and never really gotten back to.
Right.
And then it just kind of completely switches to the murderous side. So I don't know. I can see what they're going for, but I don't know if that was really fleshed out as much as this movie or its supporters might think that it is.
Right. Because again, we've already talked about like the Cenobites and their dimension more than they're in this movie already.
Right. No, it's true. And, and the thing is, they're not even, for God's sake, they weren't even given names.
No.
Like they have names now. And even that goes to show just how much of an afterthought they were, because, Clive Barker doesn't even like the name Pinhead. He said that
that's what you call a putz.
Right. The names that have been adopted for these Cenobites over time are Pinhead, Chatterer, Butterball.
Which one's that one?
Right, yeah. At least that one is descriptive of what's going on. The next one is Butterball, and then the most inventive of all of them, female Cenobite.
Oh my God.
Is what she's known as.
Yeah, that's Smurfette.
So yeah, I'm sorry if that's all the thought that's gone in.
Also, you're forgetting the engineer, which is the big creature.
Yes, the engineer, right? So yeah, you're right. I think that from what I read originally, they wanted to have Bloody Frank as sort of the visual focus for promoting this movie, but they switched to Pinhead, which, don't get me wrong, Pinhead's very cool looking. But yeah, it's for everything that is amped up about this movie in its presentation, doesn't really get the feature that you think that it would in the film itself.
Right.
So
go ahead.
Let's talk just, if we could, because I'm dying to get into one particular aspect of this movie. But in order to understand it, let's just quickly get through the cast, because it's not that big.
No, it's not. I didn't even write them all down. So we've got Claire Higgins. She's playing Julia. That's our femme fatale. Andrew Robinson. He's an American actor. He plays Larry. Then you have Sean Chapman. He plays Larry's brother, Frank. And then you have Ashley Lawrence as Kirsty, their daughter, or at least Larry's daughter from a different mother. And then I'll just throw, Doug Bradley as Pinhead, because I feel like I have to.
Yes, right. Yeah, because apparently he's the star of the show.
I don't care about Pinhead.
Right.
Nail face, I'd be afraid of.
Yeah, Nail Face sounds cool. Yeah, and he could even, work in the sex angle there. But
right.
Right. But yeah, so we don't have a huge cast here. And anybody else that is in the movie doesn't even really necessarily need to be there, whether they're put in there or not. So here's where I have, and I promise to get through this quickly, even though I'm so amped up about it. One of the biggest problems that I have with any movie, I can forgive a lot. I can forgive bad acting. I can forgive shaky sets or poor directing or uninspired directing. One thing I absolutely is just non-negotiable for me is the idea of a clear setting. And that means I have to know, if I'm going to invest myself in this movie, I have to know where I am, and I have to know who I'm watching, and I have to know where they are. Now, right. I'm not talking about a mystery where, somebody's full identity isn't fully realized until the end. That's fine. But I'm saying, if there are characters, I need to know, okay, is that person related to that person? Is that person involved with that person? Those need to be clearly established for me. But even more importantly is the setting. I like knowing where I am and what the time period is and what the area is, because I'm interested in all that kind of stuff. And what unfortunately happened in this movie, to cut right to the chase, is that this film was made in England and filmed in England, and it looks like England and it sounds like England. But when New World Pictures, Roger Corman's production company, who were the ones that ended up distributing this movie, when they got their hands on it, they said, we think that the movie is going to sell better if it's set in America, somewhere nondescript, mid-Atlantic, up and down the East Coast somewhere. And so they had certain characters' voices dubbed with American accents to kind of alleviate that. And they just sort of went with it.
Was Sean Chapman, was he dubbed, or was that his voice?
I don't know that for sure, but
that was one of my biggest issues. Is he sounded like ADR'd to hell, and his voice sounds so weird.
Right.
But I don't
No,
know if it's a bad American accent or if it's just they didn't like his, they didn't like the accent and just overdubbed him with someone else.
yeah,
That was
I
just
know.
bad at ADR.
Yeah, I believe that he was dubbed because I know that there were some of the main roles, or at least 3 actors that I can think of. I mean, I don't know their names specifically, but I know that at least 3 of the actors had their voices dubbed by actors with American accents. So to sort of alleviate the Britishness. Now, here's a problem, though.
It's not many. It's got to be like the daughter, probably.
Yeah, yeah.
Her boyfriend, whoever that guy was.
Well, probably not the daughter because she's supposed to be American, because she's Larry's daughter.
Yeah.
From America. But here, before we get too confusing, let me just say this. That part I can kind of follow. Like it was filmed in England, but New World wants to make it set in America. Oh, okay, fine. It's not the easiest thing to do, but do your best. The problem is that they don't do enough to change it, and they should have just left it because, number one, like I said, it looks, the house, the design, the exteriors, everything looks British.
Okay? Yeah, if you've ever seen any English picture or film ever.
Right. Yeah.
It's a very distinct build. It's so weird. It's a very distinct structure.
It is, and it's just distinctly English. Yeah. And then the other thing is, I don't deny that there are British people living up and down the East Coast of America, but they sure as hell aren't 1 in 3. Like not every third person in Delaware is British. Like there's just no way. But yet in this movie, when people go into like a shop or a store and the cashier speaks with a British accent, it's like, it leaves you as an audience member like, where am I? Where is this?
I'll tell you what, that I don't know if it's because I took a different approach, but that stuff didn't even register with me. And it might, because here's the approach I ended up taking with this movie, because there is something weird about the way Frank talks, right? It is this very gruff American, I'm a bad guy, this is what he sounds like. And so I started thinking just about, I was kind of reading Wikipedia while I was watching this, and like Clive Barker and how all the, everything's English in it. And I was like, oh, wait. And so, and there was one line that Frank says where he says babe casually, but not how we would use it colloquially,
Yeah.
They use babe differently. And it hit me there. I was like, oh, wait, this is like a British guy writing for a British guy, but this guy is an American. So that's why I was asking earlier about his voice, because I just figured, oh, he's just forced to do this bad. He's forced to do a American accent, and he's not good at doing it, and he can't convey it, because what I found later, because later on he puts on his brother's skin. So now the actor who's been the nice dad, Larry, is supposed to be Frank. He's able to bring some complexity. I wasn't intimidated by Larry, is really what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
And even, or I wasn't intimidated by Frank, but even Larry as Frank, I was intimidated because he wasn't trying to be a tough American. He was already the American. You know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Right. No, I know exactly. I know exactly what you mean.
But I started. My point is that once I started listening to Frank, when he would talk, I would replace it with a British accent in my head. I started enjoying his performance a lot more. So yeah, I think going back to your point, it's very British, and they should have just stuck with it being British.
Right, exactly.
Just have an American. We don't give a fuck. As long as there's someone we can understand in the movie, that's all we care about as Americans.
Yeah, just as long as there's no goddamn subtitles.
Right.
No, but but yeah, the thing is, all of that, like I don't like bad sound or bad overdubbing either. That's one of my next, least liked pet peeves. But what's really bad is that there are specific lines, because Larry's new wife, not Kirsty's birth mother, but Larry's new wife, as we are introduced to in the beginning of this movie, is British. And they don't try to hide that. But the problem is that if the movie is supposed to now be set in America, there are specific lines where even when Larry and Julia, his new British wife, go into the house, he says to her, like, "We're really going to make it here. You're back on your own turf." And so what's her own turf? Like Maryland, like she's obviously British. Like what that makes no sense whatsoever. And then there's a dinner party where somebody also says to Julia, like, "Oh, you're back in your old stomping grounds. Like, aren't you feeling good? Like, why aren't you feeling good? You're back in your old stomping grounds." Right. Those lines should have been caught by somebody in production to say, like, we got to cut the shit out of those lines, right, because that implies
they had no problem overdubbing anything in this movie. Why
right.
They stopped there?
Yeah, it makes no sense. And then what? Okay, now follow me for one more quick point. If we are to believe that, let's just say for a second, they did leave it in England. Are we to believe that this is Frank and Larry's mom's house? And that
all right, yes, then you do run into that problem.
She was born, like, she had a house in England, but they were raised in America, and now they're going back to the house in England. It doesn't make any sense. So yeah. I promise I won't go on any more about the setting, but let's just say that I guess the real main point that I'm getting to is the reason why I didn't get into this movie when it was first popular all those years ago, and all I was doing was watching horror movies, was that I feel like I never could really latch on to who these people are and how they're related to each other. Now I understand it. It's not that hard to follow the relationships, but it's just kind of lazy in its presentation there. So that's some of the bad stuff.
Right.
Let's talk about a couple of good things.
I should clarify, because again, I apologize for my sum. It was not put together well. We should, because we keep talking about Frank, that he's dead, but he's kind of come back. I should clarify. So there's a bit. So he dies in the beginning, right? The puzzle box tears him apart, and so now his brother and his wife have moved back in. So Julia's walking around the house, and this is where we kind of learn through flashbacks as she's walking into rooms that she had an affair with Frank, a very passionate affair. And so she's in the attic room where he died, and she's envisioning them having sex. And meanwhile, Larry's trying to move a sofa, and I've never seen anyone gash their hand on a nail like this before, because he like runs it all the way up the side of his hand, and he comes in to show her and is like, "I cut myself," and both hands are covered in blood. Like, there's nothing more obvious that he's injured himself. But he drips blood on the floor, and this somehow rejuvenates the shriveled remaining heart. Like, we see a heart under the floorboard, right? So the next time we see anything in that room, it's like a shriveled Voldemort Frank, like a half form. And then, so blood is needed in order for him to keep rejuvenating. So most of the time when we see Frank, like, we're referring to Frank as the brother. It's not like how you would see the brother. He looks like one of those science classroom Invisible Man guys. Like, he just looks like a thing with no skin.
Yeah, the muscular system.
Yeah,
yeah,
which looks cool. I loved like, we're kind of talking about how the Cenobites are kind of lame. The designs are awesome. I loved the designs. When Frank is first forming, it's just kind of this whole, like, primordial ooze bubbling as things start forming. And as his, like, arms form, we get this cool kind of, like, I love that. I'm afraid of spiders, I do like that look, like that. I don't know what kind of, like, specific horror it is, but how the arms are coming up out of the ground and they're just at these weird angles. It's almost Tim Burton-y kind of these odd high angles as the arms coming up and it's pushing the head up. And I just loved that whole sequence where he was forming himself. Like I'm like, oh, here's what I paid for. This is what I wanted to see. The story behind it is not good, but there's just a lot of effects in this that I loved.
Well, and they're great because, and I agree 1,000%. Frank's face, evil. First of all, that transformation scene is fantastic. But what's so great about this is that, even some of the best makeup effects, you got to only look at them for a couple of seconds because then you'll start picking it apart and realizing, seeing the craftsmanship and the,
Sure.
the creases and the pins and all this and that. But
you notice the little latex tear on the side of the cheek.
Right.
All you can see is it's flapping now.
But Frank is in close-up damn near all the time, and it still looks outstanding.
Yeah.
You're right. That is one of the absolute shining positive qualities about this movie is Frank in particular. His makeup and his evolution as he's coming back to life is very cool, and it's very, very compelling and very, very neat. And that
could have been engaging. This could have been a totally different movie. Like if I felt intimidated by him or cared about those two, because they're both just kind of evil people. She really I don't know. She really liked Frank.
Yeah, well, there was when they were trying to figure out a title for this movie, there was this kind of older lady on set that actually said, "What a woman will do for a good fuck." I suggested that for a title, and it was everybody.
Title.
Yeah, everybody got a good laugh out of it, but yeah, so she was into everything that Frank had to offer, and hook, line, and sinker, and yeah, so it becomes like this sort of what someone will do for love, like the lengths that they'll go to. It's just unfortunate for Larry that love is his brother and not him from his own wife, but so be it. But you're right, there is a lot more that could have been done with Frank's character, that they spend time on things that are unnecessary. Like there's a dinner party as they get together with friends that serves no purpose whatsoever. And instead of, here we are watching this dinner party that serves no purpose, when in the beginning of the film, when we see the puzzle box, which is referred to as, it has an actual name. It's called the Lament configuration.
Oh.
So when we see Frank buying the Lament configuration in what I believe is supposed to be Morocco, even though it looks more like China, but
like Thailand.
So he gets it, and then we get a goddamn hatchet cut, like an edit that is just as sloppy and jarring as anything, and it cuts to him surrounded by candles, kind of invoking this, working this box and getting into the S&M stuff. But I would have liked to have seen a little bit more development with that than some dinner party with characters that are eventually completely discarded as soon as they're seen. Like, right. I think there was some developmental problems there.
And God, it's like I totally forgot about the dinner party until you mentioned it, because it's like there's just insanity going on upstairs, and
right?
It's a normal dinner party going on downstairs. Like she's excusing herself to go talk to this fucking muscle monster.
Right. And the thing is, it serves, if it serves any purpose, if you want to call this a purpose, it's where Kirsty, Larry's daughter, meets her quote unquote boyfriend for the rest of the movie, Steve. And that relationship is just as unnecessary as the dinner party that gave birth to it. So
that's true.
But I will say, Kirsty is adorable. She is, and it's not easy for a woman to be pretty in 1987. The hairstyles and clothes were doing you no favors, and I love the 80s. But she is so cute and very likable as an actress. And so she gets introduced to this guy that becomes her boyfriend. But the whole thing is a little strange in that Larry, apparently back in America, fell in love with Julia. They moved to England, and now their daughter, who is old enough to live on her own, also comes over to England to live near her dad and the stepmother that she doesn't care for. So I think somebody could have helped Clive with a little bit more relationship building there.
Yeah.
But either way, here we are. We're in England, and now we.
But wait, are we supposed to be?
But no, we're not. We're not supposed to be. Yeah, we're not supposed to be. We're in Delaware.
So she didn't come to England, though. She just moved by her dad.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah.
But you're right. As you were saying it, I was like, right. And then I'm like, wait, no, they're not in England.
But see, isn't that the worst part? The movie doesn't work either way, whether it was in England or if it's in America. It doesn't
true.
work.
That's very true.
But then what's kind of funny is that in order to complete Frank's growth back into a fully, realized human, now we get this turnstile, this revolving door of murders of like these kind of just unfortunate looking dudes from the local bar.
I think they're about to get lucky. Yeah, they're just like,
they think they're about to
lifetime opportunity
to bang this woman who's probably more unattractive than she is attractive. But I mean, that's
looks like a villain. Like the way she does her hair and makeup. Yeah, she looks like a less cartoony Cruella de Vil.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, as an actress, she's okay. Like I don't have a huge problem with her. I guess she's doing what she's supposed to be doing. But yeah, we kind of quickly usher through these murders, which I'm given to understand that there was a lot of heavy editing by the MPAA there, that we don't see some of the gore that we would have seen in those murders that are used to supply Frank with his blood.
Also in the sex scene, I heard they gave them two pump thrusts from Frank. 3 is right out. You can do 2 and that's it.
And that's not even, I think
that's weird. That's such an odd. Can you imagine being on the MPAA and coming up with these rules?
I thought you were allowed to do 3 pumps.
Well, maybe now, but this was in the 80s.
Yeah, like every 20 years we get another pump allowed.
We were still, excited about putting labels on albums. So,
right, true. So yeah, now we're kind of the story sort of begins to drift away a little bit from the puzzle box and the pleasure and the pain. And now we shift into a little bit more of a conventional horror mode where, these unsuspecting sex partners are being killed quickly and Frank is growing stronger. So let's talk a little bit about where these Cenobites live and where exactly Frank escaped from. Is it hell?
Well, hold on. We gotta work our way into that because we have to explain how we know that.
Right.
God, I can't. Okay. So once Kirsty finds out that Frank's still alive, right? And she somehow grabs the puzzle box to use it as a weapon. He's like, no, don't, that's a very important thing. So she throws it out the window, then runs out of the house and grabs it. And she somehow gets in the hospital and opens it there. And this reveals the Cenobites to her, right?
Yeah.
So this is where we get essentially their backstory. And she's like, this is why I just don't understand what their powers seem to be, because they seem to have this power of teleportation and physical manipulation. They're able to summon chains and move them and shit, like, they seem to have a lot of powers, yet like we're sorry, I don't even know how to get into it. She's like having a casual conversation with these fucking Cenobites, but she's not casual. She's terrified. But the things they're saying, she's like, you had someone recently open the box, Frank Cotton? And they're like, yes, we know Frank Cotton. Like, it just sounds so dumb. She's like, he escaped you. No one escapes us. But like you said, escape from where? How? What was he? Like, what escaped? You know,
Yeah.
like none of that is ever talked about. But then they also have no idea he escaped. Like you would feel they would have some sort of supreme authority as to his capture and imprisonment, you know.
Right.
But to
And
not
it's
even know, and then then they're like, holy shit, Frank Cotton is gone. Well, here's the deal. We'll let you go, but you have to get him to admit that he escaped us. We can't just go after him and get him now. Um, it's like just take her and then go get Frank. Like they don't have the power to go find where he is.
right.
I
And
feel
it's
like you
like,
would seem leave some sort of strong residual cosmic trace, a supernatural, you know, you're a fucking demon from hell.
yeah, it's almost like you picture like once Kirsty's out of the room, like Pinhead turning to the rest of them and being like, okay, who was in charge of watching Frank Cotton?
That is exactly what I thought, because she just leaves, and I'm like, are they still in the room there? And like, well, how did this happen, guys? Dude, that's hilarious. Thought that exact thing. It was
Right. And
so weird because there's
now,
no resolution to that scene.
yeah.
They don't
And
even
you're
say like go and leave. Like it just cuts, and then the next time you see her, she's not with them or anything. She's just run back to the house.
right. But you're right. And you have brought this to light more than anyone I've ever known. But so many times in these horror movies, in any horror movie, they build these certain individuals, whoever they may be, up to have this like ultimate supreme power, but yet they have these mysterious limitations that come out of nowhere. Like, you know, took Pinhead to Great America. Like, I can ride roller coasters, but you have to pull the seat restraint down. Like what? You know, why can't you do that?
Right?
Like,
yeah.
you know, it just doesn't make
shit.
much sense. But you're right. Now, I will say though, I like cheering on Kirsty. I think there's a couple things that are interesting. You do have a teenage hero and adult victim, so that's a little bit of a spin. You also have an evil woman, villain with a female heroine at the same time. So that's kind of interesting. I like that. I do like the Cenobites. Now, I feel like there are some things that they worked really, really hard on, and then some things that they're like, it's good enough. Like fucking Butterball.
Guy, right?
Yeah, Butterball. All right.
But he's still a cool design. I love all the designs. And I think that aesthetic has been used or copied so much. Seeing those now, like if you were to have never seen those before, those designs would look tired. Like you'd be like, yeah, I've seen like this trippy horror shit before. But like for the time, like Clive Barker's has cool design. And because I loved what was the other one? Nightbreed. That was another one where the fucking monster design is so cool in that movie.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But you're right. Butterball with the sunglasses on. It's like when you put a pair of sunglasses on like a sleeping dog. You know, like it just kind of it's just like look at Mr. Cool Guy. Like
yeah, they're just hanging askew. Like there's nowhere for them to rest.
Right. But you're right. Overall, like the Chatterer guy, like that is pretty terrifying. Like I'll give credit where credit's due. And apparently, as far as the design, it was. I like the fact that Clive Barker said that the design came from a mix of Catholicism and S&M clubs. So it's like combining that two. And he described it as repulsive glamour. Like that's what he wanted them to look like. And I think that was achieved. I mean, they're interesting looking people. But yeah, they're sort of ultimately powerful and helpless at the same time. So it's a little
and they're also just kind of like, I don't even want to say vindictive. I don't even know the right word, because they make a deal with her and say, look, normally because you opened the box, we would take us with you and show you some pleasures you don't even know exist. But because we lost Frank, if you get him to say out loud that he escaped us, we'll let you go. And then they don't. They're still like, no, we're gonna take you. I'm like, well, fuck you guys. Like,
Right.
I don't know. I would think like a being at that level, like they're not concerned. Like their characters are supposed to be, they're just purveyors or explorers of experience, like, which is like the pleasure and pain thing. So they're not really like, oh, I'm into administering it. They just are explorers. So they don't care who they're doing it to. Like, why do they then have to go back on their word and still take this girl and torture her? Like, now it seems malicious. That's the word I was looking for.
Right.
It seems more malicious now. Before, they were just like, look, this is how we operate. That's the deal with the box. But why would they go back on a deal? Just don't make the fucking deal. Just take
Right.
her anyway and find another way to find Frank.
Yeah, Cenobites aren't fair. Like
No,
they're
not.
they don't play fair. And you're right. Like if
That's the other one you don't see. His name is Liar.
right. And it turns out that he's like all of them. But yeah, no, you're right. If we're supposed to buy into certain aspects of their mythology, the fact that they would then flip that mythology on its head, like they are setting the rules and then they're breaking the rules.
Right.
And so
Which
it's
I
like,
hate.
right. So
hate
that's a little off-putting. But you're right from some of the points that you made earlier, is that even still from the scenes we described, there's such little screen time of these guys that it's you're sort of afraid of them, but not really. And I think that brings up a really interesting topic. I wrote it down as I was watching it. Hellraiser is not scary. I'm just going to come right out and say it. It's cool. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And it's got a lot of gore, but part of the reason I still love these movies is that they continue to frighten me, especially if I'm watching them alone. Even if I'm not terrified in the moment, like we've talked about before, if I have to get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of the night after watching one of these things, it's makes you a little jumpy. But I'm sitting here watching Hellraiser, which, by the way, it was the first time that I had ever watched Hellraiser all the way through. Just in the last week, I had never seen it all the way through before.
I'd seen this one like 3 or 4 times, but
really?
It's very forgettable. Like I probably couldn't have told you the beats of this movie, and I'd seen it 3 or 4 times. Like as it's happening, I'm like, "Oh, right, this is this part." But
it is not a scary film. It's not frightening, and that's okay. Not everything has to be jump scares. I'm not trying to pigeonhole it, but I think it is a worthwhile point to say that there's not a lot of jump out of your seat moments here.
It's horrifying imagery. And that's about it.
Right. And it's something to where it's really making me wonder. And of course, I know we've been touching on this all the way through, but it's making me wonder, what is the singular thing or a couple of things that make people love this franchise so much?
Yeah,
and I'm not saying that I dislike it. I think here we are always talking about, how movies or horror movies tend to fall into cliche, and that there's too many remakes and this, that, and the other. So I applaud this movie for having some originality. The Little Shop of Horror things notwithstanding, but
sure.
But it is original. But I just don't know if it didn't strike me as powerful enough to embrace in the same way that you would Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, or it just didn't have that.
The sequels have to grow more of the lore around the Cenobites, right? And like they'd have to. I would imagine even. I feel like I've seen the third one, but I never saw the second one. But again, they're just very forgettable. But there has to be a lot more Cenobite action in those following movies, right?
I'm guessing that they probably centered it around Pinhead eventually. I mean, he became such the cornerstone for this franchise.
But there's nothing defining about, you could take nearly any franchise and be like, oh, Halloween, oh, the one with the live stream, or you could take any franchise and probably boil one of those episodes down and be able to tell someone which one you're trying to talk about. You know what I'm saying? But with
Right.
Hellraiser, I don't know of any of those plots, even if
Right.
you haven't seen some of those like Halloween movies, you like know a Paul Rudd one exists or something like that.
Right.
Like no one's done a Hellraiser. Like who do you know who's ever been in a Hellraiser movie?
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. No, I mean,
And there are 10 of them.
Right. And I'm going to give you here's another great example. I have a note that I set out to write down that just says, Jesus statue got me. And I don't even remember.
Oh, it was a great jump scare.
Was that it?
Yeah, she's just in a room and it just like the daughter is this is after Frank's put on the skin and she's hiding from him in like one of the back rooms.
Oh,
trying
that's
to shimmy
it. Yeah.
into the corner, and this like Jesus statue just like tilts into frame. There's no jump music or anything. It's a earned good jump scare.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So now I remember. But I was going to say I don't even remember.
But yes,
what
you're right.
down.
Like that was like a big moment in the movie for me. I was like, ooh, nice. I just don't think he's a good director. I mean, I think that's
and
it feels very British. It's a weird. There's something about the way shots are set up, or I don't know. I don't know how to explain it because I've watched a lot of British films and television in my life, and there is this distinct quality between not even just the film quality, obviously, because we use totally different frames, frame format, but just in the approach of filming. And it just feels like that's in this movie, but I can't put my finger on it. This movie just feels off the whole time.
Yeah, I guess the word is sort of it's just like identifiable. It's the movie is kind of at a distance. It doesn't pull you in. It doesn't suck you in. I think it has the potential to do that. I think the story, and if they had pursued different aspects of the story, like I was talking about, if they explored Frank's history or if they did more with the Cenobites, I think that could have sucked you in.
Yeah.
But the movie just kind of, it never really plants its feet. It just sort of hops around, and I don't think it finds its center. And truth be told, Clive Barker was a first-time director, and kudos to him for taking control of his material and trying to do something with it. I think I would say that, oh boy, I don't know if I'm gonna say there's more good here than bad, I suppose, but I feel like it's more framework than it is a finished product. Because you don't. I don't know. I mean, even Larry's character, who maybe seems, and I don't want to just say he's the most relatable because happens to be American. I can relate to British people, like if I have to in a film.
Right.
But even his character gets kind of left by the wayside, and I don't know. You're right. This movie is missing some veneer or layer of cohesion and maybe professionalism.
Yeah. Larry just kind of like disappears. Like he's a person that Julia would need to avoid, which she does easily, and brings 3 or 4 guys into their home and kills them. And he's never an intrusion. Like it's never an obstacle. Like one time.
They must
one time. But it's like 1 out of 4. I feel like I would get caught with the first one.
Yeah, like there's actually a current case going on in our area, where like police will find like one speck of dried blood in the crack of concrete and be able to prosecute on that. Like she just sloppily brings guys from like the airport bar up to their place,
and
like
then they get drained. Like I did like the look that they have after Frank drains them.
Yeah,
but like then she's just like picking them up and carrying them. Like it has to be the messiest process because these bodies are fucked.
Yes. Right. And so I don't know, I guess if I had to be articulate about it. I would say that this movie is probably more cool than it is good. Like there are cool elements, cool visuals, cool ideas, but none of it is really wonderfully executed.
Yeah.
With the, so I think that was, again, that I go back to the reason why I never got into this franchise in the first place was that I didn't feel connected to it. And then it really kind of takes another misstep at the end where here's Kirsty, she's the likable one, in the most likable one in the whole bunch. And yet she has been, surviving and figuring things out and staying alive. But yet, because it's the mid 80s, it has to be a man that swoops in and saves her at the end.
Right. Yeah.
This fucking
nondescript boyfriend.
Right. And it's almost like that's the only purpose that he serves, that there would be another person to come into the house to assist her at the end. But yeah, so
good point. I was so tired of caring about this movie by him. I couldn't even get mad at that.
Right. So here's something that I'm going to do, and I know that we ask for audience and listener participation pretty frequently. I'm really almost begging for huge fans of this franchise, if you're listening, to write in, and feel free to get pissed off. I mean, you can tell me that I missed something completely, or that I'm looking at it the wrong way. Maybe this movie, like it. Here's the problem. This movie to me feels like it is meant to have a serious tone. It doesn't feel like it's meant to have a fun wink, wink, Friday the 13th, teenagers in the woods. Let's have some fun with this while we carve up some kids. This movie feels like it's meant to be put across in a serious horror tale tone.
Yeah.
But I'm not finding a lot of fun there other than observing the coolness of the look. So tell me, am I watching it wrong? Am I putting too high of expectation on it? Do I need to see maybe by watching one of the sequels or two of the sequels before it gets really bad, maybe that would broaden the scope of the first film for me. I mean, tell me to do that if I should.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it on my own unless somebody tells me to do it, but I'd be very interested to hear the opinions of others who really worship at the altar of these movies.
Yeah, I agree. I'd love to hear some feedback on this one, because we obviously. So, do you recommend?
Oh man, if you yeah, I do. But it's as enthusiastic as my delivery is right now.
Right,
because
sure.
I don't think that it is a bad movie. I don't think it's a waste of time. I guess the problem is that the expectations that I had, because of it's sort of, its reputation kind of precedes itself, right? So you expect this really great, awesome fucking movie because it's Hellraiser, and it to me it does not live up to that.
Right.
So it's a recommend, but it's not a strong recommend.
Yeah. I would say I don't recommend, but I would say the only reason to watch this is if you're just interested in old horror and want to know like the cultural foundations. This is included. I don't know if it should be, but it is. So just for a historical sense, I would say watch this, but other than that, I think it's pretty skippable.
There is one cool fact.
Man, I'm floored. I just thought it was going to be a lot cooler. Because when you were kind of ambivalent about doing it, I was like, well, no, I mean, I've seen it at least a couple times. I didn't hate it, right? No, I kind of like it, right? But then as you're watching it, it's just like, oh, no, not really. Like, this is why I didn't really know how I felt before, because it's just very forgettable.
You know what it is it's like what you were describing about the feeling of like British shows and movies. You know what this movie, it does feel British. And you know what British movies feel like? They feel like when it's like Sunday afternoon and kind of rainy outside. and it's just kind of overcast. It's like the world isn't coming to an end necessarily, but it's just kind of like,
it just feels like a sigh, like a
yeah. Yeah, it's great. I mean, with apparently pleasure and pain mixed in there somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right.
But yeah, that's where I'm at with it. Now, hey, I don't want to bore our audience. If you want to know something cool, there is heavy use of insects in this movie.
Oh yeah.
And I was trying to figure out where that might be coming from. I had one theory I had is that these Cenobites are sort of put across as like a beings of like a higher or deeper understanding of pleasure and pain, and maybe it's the juxtaposition between humans and a lesser life form of insects. I'm not sure, but here's one cool fact for you: cockroaches are fast, and they had to film them. So in order to slow them down, they would freeze them. And then take them out of the freezer, and that would slow them down a little bit.
As they would thaw, they would start moving.
Yeah, right.
Holy
so
cow.
that's kind of cool, I guess. Something.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's something. All right. I don't want to talk about this movie anymore. All right. So that was 1987's Hellraiser, written and directed by Clive Barker. I don't think we said, but it made $14 million on a budget of $900K. So that's pretty impressive. That's impressive. So cool. Tim, next week it's like Halloween week. So we're gonna do Halloween 3. Yes.
Boom!
The Witch. Season of the Witch. Which I love it. I'm excited.
Tom Atkins, our boy.
Oh, thrill me, baby.
Yeah, can't wait for that. Part of me was like, hey, let's just do Halloween because it is the king of them all. But you know what? Halloween 3 deserves a much more forgivable take and embrace than it has been given for decades. And maybe we can give it that.
Yeah, we're gonna jumpstart its popularity. Okay, so yes, please follow us on Instagram at Slumber Podcast Massacre. Our email is slumberpodcast@gmail.com. Our Patreon is patreon.com/Slumber Podcast Massacre. A huge thanks to all our patrons for helping make this show possible. Big shout out to Sarah Dooley. She's got her new album out. It's called When You're Gone. It's great. Very proud of her. Tim, do you got anything else you have to say about Hellraiser?
Jesus wept.
Oh,
that's a cool line. It's a cool line. I'll give it that. Because
true.
do you know that was a replacement line?
Oh, was it? Good, because it felt out of place.
The original line is "fuck you." It was the line. And then I think it might have actually been the actor himself, I think, that suggested something cooler, and he went with Jesus wept, which that's pretty cool. We'll end it on a positive note.
All right.
Hellraiser's a great movie. Why not?
I agree. All right. See you, Timmy.
They